And we begin with breaking news this midday. Longtime Dallas County Commissioner John Wiley Price has been found not guilty on 7 of the major federal counts against him, including bribery and mail fraud. The jury was hung on 4 tax counts. Now, the jury has been dismissed. It's not clear if Price will be retried on those 4 counts. His former assistant, Daphne Fain, was fully acquitted. So now we go to WFAA political reporter Jason Whiteley in our Dallas newsroom for more. Jason.
Alicia, this is a stunning.
All right, we continue with breaking news this midday. Longtime Dallas County Commissioner John Wiley Price found not guilty on 7 of 11 major federal counts against him, including bribery and mail fraud. The jury was hung on 4 tax counts. The jury has now been dismissed. It's still unclear at this point if Price will be retried on those 4 counts. His former top assistant, by the way, Daphne Fain, fully acquitted. So I'm now joined by Victor Vital, a Dallas defense attorney, on this midday. Thank you so much for joining us. This is major news. Did you expect this to play out in this way?
It's a huge shocker. So when we heard that the jury was hung on some counts, the conventional wisdom, I think, across seasoned trial lawyers and courtroom observers was that we had a hung jury on the bribery case, and that the tax case was a slam dunk. What we have is the reverse. It's a shocker.
I mean, we're talking over 100 pieces of evidence. Do you think it was a case of this just being too complicated, or was it really the case that perhaps the prosecution just failed to make their case?
So really what it is, you know, the government talked about the mountain of evidence. This is an example of what happens to a mountain of evidence when it's faced with the highest burden of proof that we know in law, beyond a reasonable doubt, with seasoned defense lawyers who whittled that mountain of evidence down to an anthill, and you have no smoking gun. That was the prosecution's burden from the start. And when you had seasoned defense lawyers whittling down that mountain to an anthill, number one, and number two, when they skillfully decided not to put the commissioner on the witness stand and just called 2 strong witnesses in their case and they rested, the government was faced with the prospect of what they did not do, as opposed to the jury focusing on what the commissioner did in his case. So the intense focus of the jury was on the shortcoming of the government as opposed to judging the commissioner's case.
Very interesting. So now the question is, you know, do you think that the prosecution should retry this case in a month's time? What do you make of that?
So I'm smiling when you ask the question, because this was billed as a corruption case. With the tax case being a subtitle, that's kind of the throwaway case, but this is a corrupt politician that engaged in quid pro quo conduct, money for votes and influence. The jury says this was not that. So it calls into question whether the government should move forward. In my view, because the jury rejected the prosecution's main narrative, I don't know that they should move forward.
If they were to move forward, how would they sort of redirect, in your opinion?
I can't answer that, and I don't know that they could either.
Interesting. So now that John Wiley Price has been cleared on these 7 counts here, the question is also, when he goes back into office, if he goes back into office, how much political power does he actually have? How damaging was all of this, even though at this point he's now been found not guilty on those 7 counts? How powerful is he moving forward as a politician here in Dallas?
I think it's counterintuitive for me to say this, or maybe it is intuitive, but my view is he is elevated because they took a shot at him and they missed.
Almost as if he's invincible, you're saying?
Right.
Wow. I mean, so many years went into investigating him. At one point, the most documented case in U.S. history. Is this just embarrassing, do you think, for the prosecution? Or was it really that the defense was so strong and so clear in their method, in their manner of defending him, that they were able to come out on top?
It's the latter. I'm not going to blame the prosecutors, except there were some missteps by the government regarding the production of evidence that the defense skillfully and rightly seized upon and got an instruction to the jury in that regard. So it calls the process, the investigation, and the integrity of the investigation into question. But these were skillful defense lawyers, very skillful, who tried a good case and poked a lot of holes. That's what we do. as defense lawyers, when you're trying a case, you create reasonable doubt, and they did just that.
They did that, all right.
And without a smoking gun, the government was found wanting.
Victor Vidal, former prosecutor, thank you so much for your perspective on this. We'll turn back now to our Jason Wiley in the newsroom, who continues to follow the details of this breaking news this midday. Jason?
Alicia, perspective on there, what Victor just mentioned.
All right, so we are continuing that, following that breaking news regarding John Wiley Price's trial, found not guilty on 7 of 11 counts. We will continue to follow this breaking news all day today, again today on News 8 at 4. I want to give you just a few updates now. This news pretty much broke around the second half hour of the 11 o'clock hour. We have our teammates in place all throughout Dallas, getting some reaction from folks in his district, getting reaction from both sides. So we will continue to give you that information later on today. Now we want to get to some news regarding former President Bush. His spokesman tells us he was discharged today after being treated for a mild case of pneumonia and chronic bronchitis. Also, there you see President and Mrs. Bush very pleased to be home, spending time with their family and their friends. And they say they are so grateful for the outstanding care that they received by former President Bush's doctors and nurses. The 92-year-old was hospitalized for a total of 10 days. Benbrook police have arrested a juvenile after a lockdown at Western Hills High School. Police say they located an unloaded weapon outside the school, but they're not giving much information beyond that. Neither is the school district. At this point, the lockdown is lifted. And now we head over to meteorologist Greg Fields for the latest on the potential for some severe weather. Greg?
Yeah, and it looks like our day.
Great reminder at this point, Greg, to let people know, remind them to get that WFAA app, so this way you can stay on top of all the weather alerts. You can see the radar in your neighborhood and get those push alerts, as we know, when that weather starts to get a little crazy in your area.
It very well could tomorrow.
So thank you so much for that update, Greg. Really appreciate it. And thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for News 8 Midday. Be sure to join us once again for News 8 at 4. We will continue to cover that breaking news today regarding the John Wiley Price corruption trial, and we will have more headlines for you later on. Then in the meantime, you can stay up to date with all the headlines by visiting our website, WFAA.com, and again, have that WFAA app to stay on top of what's going on. We'll see you again for News 8 at 4.